Hey everyone, Ian from Novel Music here, and today we're going to do a walkthrough of Rhythmicana, which is one of our Max for Live MIDI devices that you can is available for purchase on our website. And we're going to go through all the features and everything, but first I'd like to explain some conceptual ideas about what a Rhythmicon is. It was developed by Henry Cowell, the composer, and Leon Theremin, famous for the theremin, of course, but it invented many interesting things. Back in about, I think in early 30s, 1931 or so, they came out with this device called the Rhythmicon. And what it demonstrated was that there's a continuum between noise and pitch. And what I mean by noise is unpitched sounds. And then what I mean by pitch, of course, are pitch sounds. So when we play an interval on the keyboard, like an octave, inside of that is actually a rhythm. And when we play a rhythm, certain rhythms inside of that somewhere is an interval or a harmony that we don't hear when we're playing it, but under different circumstances, it turns into a pitch. So to demonstrate that, I've got this two snare drums here, and you can see the ratio between these two snare drums is 2:1. So for every 2 times we get it in the one snare drum above, we have it once in the snare drum below. Right now we're doing this at a very slow BPM. Now if I start to raise this, all right, getting faster. Sounds more like a roll. All right, and luckily Ableton's transport goes all the way up to 999 beats per minute. And it's going faster, and now it takes on a pitch, as you can hear. It's going so fast that it's oscillating, becomes its own oscillator. Okay, now that is creating an octave between the two, all the way up there. Let's try it with another relationship. Here is 3 in the space of 2. So for every 3 hits of the top snare drum, we have 2 hits of the bottom one. And it's probably a familiar rhythm. Okay, do the same thing. And what do we get? We get a 5th. Perfect 5th. So perfect 5th is a 3-to-2 relationship. And lastly, I've built one for 4 in the space of 3. So for every 4 hits, there's 3 in the bottom one. Okay, do the same thing. And what do we get? Perfect 4th. So this is how the concept of a Rhythmicon was developed. And in fact, they built this machine with an actual keyboard. And when you played an octave on the keyboard, the notes were triggered in that ratio of 2:1. And so that's essentially what Rhythmicana is, with some extra things added in to make it more musical, and I hope more fun to use in your own productions. So let's start with the basics here. Rhythmicana has its own sequencer. It's 2 lanes, velocity and duration, and you can choose to loop or not, so it can just go as a one-shot through the sequence if you want, or it loops. Most of the time you might want it to loop. You've got forward, reverse, and forward, reverse directions, and you have up to 64 steps. You can hit reset, will clear, and set it to sort of a default value, which is sort of the middle for the velocity, and the duration, the middle as well. You can also choose random if you just want to create some random patterns, which oftentimes can result in some fun, happy accidents. And then, so we have this keyboard here as well. So let's see how this works. Now I'm going to play it middle C. And you see that blue note there has appeared on what would be the C of this keyboard. This is like a piano roll style keyboard. Now nothing's happening because this is important. This device needs to have the transport running. Ableton's clock needs to be on. So I'm going to turn that on. And now when I hit this key, you'll see that it's going very rapidly. That's because I didn't reset my the tempo of this live set. Let's put it back to 120. Okay. Now I'm going to turn the click on so you can hear. Yeah. So that's going every quarter note. And this is because over here under the settings, we've got the root note set to middle C, C3. The root pulse is a quarter note. Everything else we do is going to be measured against this. Now let me play the C above that one. You hear that? Every time the blue one hits one note, we get two notes in the red one. Both C in this case. Now let's add the G. Now we're getting a more interesting rhythm here because I have Quantize on. I actually want to turn that off for now. Here, let's listen. There's that 3:2 ratio that we heard earlier. Let's add an F. Take the G away. Try it below too. There's that rhythm that we recognize from earlier. So all of these ratios are observed, and oftentimes they create nice rhythmic ideas, but sometimes they create very odd rhythmic structures that we wouldn't normally hear. So something like C against E flat creates an interesting kind of rhythmic dissonance. Of course, the ultimate rhythmic dissonance is going to be C against D flat or C against B. They sort of go in and out of phase with each other since they're so close together. Now that's fun and all, and so you can adjust what the root note is. I think for this demonstration I'll just keep it at middle C, but you can change it to anything you want, all the lowest to the highest MIDI notes possible. And then the root pulse as well, you can change. I'll keep it as a quarter note for this, but you can adjust it so it's, you know, an eighth note pulse as the basis of everything, a 16th down to a whole note. So let's go back to having that C in the D flat. Now, I recognize most people may not want to work with rhythms like this all the time, so we have a quantize feature. Now they're quantized to a 16th note. You can hear that with this. So it becomes a lot more rhythmic, and then it frees me up to play richer chords without worrying about if it's going to feel synchronized or not. I mean, technically all of this without quantize is mathematically perfectly synchronized, but it sounds messy. I mean, I like it personally, but it's also fun to turn quantize on to get kind of instant grooves, and grooves that I myself probably wouldn't come up with on my own. Yeah, it's kind of a groove machine. So the rate of the quantization can be adjusted. Right now, the default 16th note, which I think works really well, can do the what is the I believe the triplet eighth notes, dotted eighth, I think that is, quarter note. So you have lots of choices here. I won't go through them all. And you can actually go up higher to 32nd notes, all the way up to 128th notes. Besides that, we have adjustment of the amount of quantization. So all the way at 0, it's as if you have this off, basically. And then if I turn it on, it locks in. So if you want it some of that mess, but still some of the tightness, then you can have it slightly less than 100%. We also have swing. Let's put this to 8th note. You can hear it starting to swing a bit. All the way up, we get the full swing. Let's put it to quarter and try that. Yeah. And then, like most of our devices, we have a trigger function which it gates some of the notes based on the probability. So at 100%, we hear all of the notes, and at 50%, 51%, we'll hear that half the time we'll hear them, half the time we won't. Let's turn it all the way up so you get the difference. Start turning it down. Yeah, it becomes more sparse. And in addition, we can invert the relationships. So meaning that, the way it is now, I play my C and I play this C 2 octaves above. It's every one note is getting 4 orange notes, every one blue note. We can invert that relationship. So now, you see, every 4 blue notes, we're getting 1 orange. Now let's add in a note 2 octaves below. That's our C 2 octaves below middle C, and look, I'm getting 4 of those. Turn invert off, and they go back to the relationship that we expect. This is interesting to play with, especially if you have a kind of widely spaced chord. And then you hit invert. All of a sudden the higher notes take on, they're moving more slowly through the sequence. Lastly, we have this fold button here. What it does is how do I explain this? Instead of having the octave, in this case the red note, move twice as fast, it's always going to move at the rate of the root here. So it's always going to move at a quarter note. And this G, let's turn quantize off for a moment. This G, the rate that the G runs at, the G above that, instead of moving twice as fast, if I turn this on, now they locked in together. So it sort of reduces the amount of variety of speeds you're going to hear. Turn quantize on again. Okay, now I'm going to turn, this is a fairly full texture, I'm going to turn fold off. Actually, let's quantize to 32nd note. Okay, turn fold on. Yeah, it sort of reduces the speed of the possible speeds we're going to hear. Invert. Now the lower notes are moving faster. Great. Now let's show off a bit more of the sequencer. So I talked about the 2 lanes, so let's actually make a little bit of a sequence. So this is an envelope of velocity growing and then coming down. I'm going to set this to forward reverse, and let's do something with the duration so that maybe it's longer notes at first and then shorter notes and comes up. Let's try that out. Yeah, and since each note is moving at its own speed through the sequence, they're all going through the same envelope, but we get to hear that envelope in a polyphonic setting. So yeah, many different shapes are possible. Let's just do random. Now it's randomized them both. You can keep clicking on it until you find one that you like. So that's the relationship with that. Now, however, if you don't want to use the sequencer, that's another feature we have. So you can turn the sequencer off, and you can just work with, note that these parameters are grayed out until you disable the sequencer. Now you can just do control of the duration just in percentage. So if you want all the notes to be 100%, then they can be that, and then we can bring it down. You know, you're hearing that, they get shorter and shorter. So think of this as like the gate length. And then we can add some variation to that. So let's put this like to about 50%. So they're all 50% gate length, duration, and then turning the variation up. It introduces some just random deviation of that duration. This is particularly useful if you're not looking for a sort of cyclical envelope that repeats through each note moving through it. This is more linear. And then we have the same for the velocity. So the velocity can be varied. Yeah, so now you're hearing certain notes pop out. Yeah, and so that covers most of the features. Lastly, we just have 2 LFOs on board, and we have anything here that has a 1, 2, or an X is a parameter that can be modulated on board the device. Of course, Max Relive has tons of LFOs that are able to map to parameters. So if there's something that you want to map that isn't available, you can also use a free running LFO. But it's kind of convenient to have this on board the device. So there are 2 of them, and you can enable and disable them. You can, typical settings, you can choose the shape of the low frequency oscillator shape. You can choose if it's synced to the clock or if it's just a free running frequency. And let's see how this works. So okay, let's go back to using the sequencer, and why don't we work with the root note? Okay, now I'm going to reset the sequencer. Okay, now note when I change the root note, the speed is changing because it's recalculating how fast this note should run based on that root note. So this would be an interesting thing to maybe modulate. So let's turn that on. As soon as I turn it on, you see that it's picked up the sine shape of LFO1. I've got it set to rate, and it's running the full range. So let's try that with everything. Okay, now I think that doesn't work as well as I was hoping. So what I want to do instead is not allow the full range of modulation of the parameters. So that's what this little bar down here does. So instead, why don't we confine it to this space? So you can just click and drag how much of the parameter should be modulated. So I'm going to go with this much. Actually, let's try that. Let's see how that sounds. Yeah, I like that a lot better. In combination with something going on with the sequencer having a shape to it. Now, trying to think of what else we should modulate. We could do the triggers. So let's do that with LFO2. We'll have that run as a slow-moving based in hertz, not tied to the clock. And same thing, we can have it so that it doesn't do the full range. Maybe let's set it so it's more like a square wave. Yeah, so now it's toggling between those 2 values since that's the shape of the square wave on and off. Yeah, so you can modulate these and get even more interesting rhythmic effects and sequences that, again, at least myself, I probably wouldn't come up with without the aid of this device. So anyway, thanks for watching this. If you have questions, you can leave them in the chat below. Please consider subscribing to this channel. I'm going to keep putting out videos describing how to use our devices. And we'll be using this channel also to announce new products and updates as they come out. Thanks again for watching, and tune in next time.